David, there's a chair right here for you. David, right here.
Okay. I've got to sit down.
This one might be easier for him. This one might be better for you, Kendall, if you want it.
It's fine.
It's a little more flat. Okay.
That's okay. Well, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to do some reading here. I wrote this, so I figure I can read it. This is a complex story, and it needs to be given accurately. Brother Wilcox said nobody knows what happened here. That's not true. There has been a lot of research that's done. I've read every book that's ever been written. Spent 2 years at the Church History Library with Buck and Don. They were only there for a short time of the 2 years I was there, but I got to spend quite a bit of time researching Meadow Massacre because Marlon K. Jensen wanted me to. This has been published. It's out of print now, and I won't read all of it, but I'll read some of it. In July of 1857, there were 2,587 church members that were at up in Big Cottonwood Canyon at Silver Lake. They were celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Saints' arrival in Utah. They all remembered that Brigham Young had said, if our enemies give us 10 years unmolested, we'll ask no quarter. We'll never be driven again. Well, it was 10 years to the day on the 24th of July, 1857, when the 4 men rode into camp: Judson L. Stoddard, Nicholas Grossback, Orrin Porter Rockwell, Abraham O. Smoot, with disturbing news. Daniel H. Wells was the commander of the Nauvoo Legion. He called the people together at the end of the dancing, and he announced that an army was on the way to Utah to put down a supposed rebellion against the United States. Brigham Young regarded the army as a mob because James Buchanan, the president, had never told him that an army was coming, or that Alfred E. Cumming was going to replace him as the territorial governor. So he began planning for defense of Utah. And part of that defense was to reorganize the Nauvoo Legion, as they called it, the militia. Daniel H. Wells organized it into 13 districts. And the 9th military district, as we said before, was Parowan, Beaver, Iron, and Washington counties. He also planned for an escape route, a way to get out of there, get out of the situation, and people started moving south. In denouncing the approaching army as a mob, Brigham Young vowed to rally the Utah Indians to help. He said, they have either got to learn to help us, or the United States will kill us both. So he sent Apostle George A. Smith to southern Utah with instructions that were written by David H. Wells to tell the people what to do. The instructions were that the Nauvoo Legion was to be put in a state of readiness. All ammunition and guns were to be regulated. They were to report any person who disposed as much as a kernel of grain to anybody that wasn't a member of the church. Elder Smith left Salt Lake. Wow, I think the wind's blowing out here. Elder Smith left Salt Lake August 3rd, 1857, the very day the Thatcher Party left Salt Lake City, and arrived in Parowan August 8th, gave the instructions to Colonel Dame, William H. Dame, the president of the Parowan Stake. And then he came to Cedar and gave the instructions to Isaac C. Haight, the stake president in Cedar. He was also the mayor of Salt Lake City and the main officer in the Nauvoo Legion in Cedar City. The message that George A. Smith delivered to Jacob Hamlin, and Jacob Hamlin's ranch at that time was just north of here. This is the very south end of Mountain Meadows. There was a spring here, the Magatsu Spring, and the Fancher party camped about 100 yards from the spring so they wouldn't pollute the spring, but they could also get to the water. But the instructions that he gave to Jacob Hamlin was to secure the help of the Indians, tell them to prepare for war. Jacob Hamlin left on the 24th of August to go north to meet with Brigham Young to get clarification of the role that the Indians would have. And at the same time, George A. Smith started his return to Salt Lake. When Jacob Hamlin and the 12 Indian chiefs from southern Utah, and they were from the Pinot Band, the Cedar Band, the Harmony Band, Santa Clara Band, the 12 chiefs went with Jacob Hamlin to Salt Lake. When they got to Corn Creek, which is Fillmore, the home territory of Chief Canoish, the Boband chief, the Fancher Baker party was camped there. Until this point, the Fancher Baker party had been going pretty leisurely. They were averaging 7 miles a day. And the main reason for that was because they had a large herd of cattle. We don't know exactly how many. We're pretty sure there were at least 300 head. Some have said maybe as many as 1,000 head. While seeing the Indians, they became concerned, so they sped up. They began averaging 12 miles a day. So they reached Cedar City on the 3rd day of September, 1857. Jacob Hamlin and the Indians arrived in Salt Lake on September 1st, met with Brigham Young. He told them that they would be the battle axe of the Lord. And almost immediately after meeting with Brigham Young, they headed south, and 7 days later they were here at Mountain Meadows attacking the Fancher Baker party. Jacob Hamlin was not with them. He went to Tooele, courted Miss Priscilla Levitt as a plural wife, married her in the endowment house in Salt Lake on September 11th, got back here to his ranch on the 18th of September. So he wasn't here, excuse me, to manage the Indians when all of this was transpiring. On January 1st of 1856, John D. Lee was appointed as the Indian agent for the United States government with a salary of $50 a month. He was to distribute feed, seeds, tools, anything that the Indians might need. It was said that the Indians loved John D. Lee, and they very likely did. And it was John D. Lee that dealt with managing the Indians here at Mountain Meadows, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons he got so much of the major blame for the massacre. Next in authority to Colonel Dame in Parowan was Isaac C. Haight, the stake president in Cedar City. Next to him was John M. Higbee. John M. Higbee was the first counselor in the Cedar stake presidency. Philip Clinging Smith was the bishop of the Cedar Ward. He was an officer in the militia. Samuel McMurdy was his first counselor. He was an officer in the Nauvoo Legion. And all of them participated in the massacre here. And all but Samuel McMurdy were later indicted, and there were attempts to make arrests.
Need a water? David, you want to get him water?
Yeah. Well, throughout the excitement caused by the coming of the Army, immigrants continued to come through Utah, headed to California. Most of them, of course, took the northern route, the shorter route. Those that were late in the season took the southern route. The Fancher Baker Party took the southern route because they were advised to do that in Salt Lake City, because the grazing was better and because they might get in trouble crossing Donner's Summit going to California on the northern road. Next to Alexander Fancher in the party, it was called the Fancher Baker Party because John Baker, a one-quarter Cherokee Indian, had moved from Alabama to Arkansas in 1849, and he was co-leader in this group. It was said that Baker was a fast friend but a bitter enemy. He had been in several brawls with his neighbors. It was even rumored that he had killed some of his neighbors. The party was a fairly prosperous party. It was made up of 135 people. There were at least 15 of them that were mothers. There were 60 children. 43 of them were over 6 years of age, 6 to 18. There were 55 adult men. Some of them were single men. There were married men. There were teamsters. And there were 7 cowboys that had been hired by Baker. And these cowboys were from Texas and Missouri. And it was probably those 7 cowboys that caused so much of the animosity with their bragging and their drinking and all of those kinds of things. There were 17 children that were 6 years of age or younger in the party. They were going to Visalia, California. Alexander Fancher had been there twice, so he was really the one that was most important in leading the company. They were going to be farmers and ranchers. He really liked the potential of the San Joaquin Valley. As the party made its way slowly southward, rumors began to reach southern Utah about the party. One of the rumors was they had poisoned some beef and given it to the Indians up at Kenai, Utah, and several Indians had died, plus one Latter-day Saint. Richard Turley, Len Leonard, and Ron Walker did some really serious research about this rumor of the poisoned cattle. And it is true, they gave cattle to the Indians, but those cattle were not poisoned. They had a disease that did not affect the cattle, but it would kill humans if you had any open sores for the infection to invade. And so indeed there had been some deaths caused by the generosity of the party. Another factor in the animosity was something they probably didn't even know about. They left Arkansas 2 weeks before this event took place. Parley P. Pratt, one of the original 12 apostles of the church, was murdered by Hector McLean. Parley P. Pratt had married Hector McLean's ex-wife, Eleanor, and Hector McLean had tracked Parley P. Pratt down, shot him and stabbed him and left him for dead at Fort Smith, Arkansas. It took 2.5 hours for Parley P. Pratt to bleed out, but it was reported in the Deseret News on July 1st about this murder. Indeed, the Fancher Baker Party had left Arkansas 2 weeks before this happened. They had no part in it, probably knew nothing about it, but it was part of the animosity toward the company.
Teddy Peck.
I'm not reading as much as I thought I would, but we'll see. Cedar City was pretty much the last place on the trail that they could resupply. Nobody would sell to them. That caused problems. And these 7 macho young cowboys from Missouri and Texas got drunk in Cedar City. They helped themselves to some of the supplies that they wanted that Cedar residents wouldn't sell to them. They would pop their bullwhips over their oxen and call them Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball and get along, you old SLB, and so forth, which caused animosity in Cedar City. And Don's grandmother was the trailblazer in researching the Mountain Meadow Massacre. I became interested in it when I was 10 years old, when Anita Brooks's book Mountain Meadow Massacre came out. I guess that's why I majored in history. The local miller also charged the company a whole cow for grinding a few bushels of wheat, an exorbitant price. Well, they went on beyond Cedar, traveled 35 miles southwest to reach Mountain Meadows. They got here Sunday night. They came in kind of a disorganized group. They didn't all arrive at once. Some of them may have arrived even after dark. They didn't circle their wagons. It was kind of an unorganized camp, maybe because of weariness or carelessness or whatever. Anyway, they planned to stay here a couple of days to recruit their livestock. It was a good place to be. In the meantime, in Cedar City, and it was Sunday when they arrived here at Mountain Meadows. Early Sunday morning, the Cedar City High Council met with Isaac C. Haight, John M. Higbee, Samuel Bateman, the bishopric of the Cedar Ward, the High Council of the Cedar Stake. And in that meeting, Philip Clinging-Smith, the bishop of the Cedar Ward, proposed that the company, well, they had actually wanted to make some arrests for the people helping themselves to things the Mormons wouldn't sell them. Isaac C. Haight actually sent to Parowan and asked if they could use the militia to help the constable make the arrest. He told him, no, you can't do that. So at this early morning meeting, Philip Clinging-Smith decided the way to punish this party would be to stir up the Indians, have them kill some of the party or all of the party, and to take their possessions. Some of them argued against it, Laban Morrell particularly. He proposed they should send a messenger to Salt Lake City to find out from Brigham Young what they should do. A message was written, but Isaac C. Haight didn't send it until Monday afternoon. Monday morning, the attack began. And as you look around here, you can see that there are hills, there are rocks, There's sagebrush. There are good places to hide. And this company was not well prepared. They hadn't circled their wagons. So early Sunday morning, gunshots rang through this valley. John M. Higbee and John D. Lee were managing the Indians. At the first gunfire, they began to circle the wagons. They circled all but one. They dug a pit, they dug rifle pits. They returned fire. The return fire killed at least one Indian, killed one Indian, wounded two Indian chiefs. Magatsu and Big Bill were wounded. The return fire from the camp ended that first assault. But they had suffered probably 15 people that were wounded. The Indians had guns, but they weren't particularly good marksmen. 10 people either died immediately or died within a week, less than a week of their wounds. We know that 3 men that were wounded died a few days later. So 15 were hit and 10 were killed in this initial assault. Isaac C. Haight did not send the courier to Salt Lake City until 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, September 7th. He was waiting because the attack had been planned to be 30 miles south of here, in a narrow canyon along the Santa Clara. They attacked earlier than they thought. James M. Haslam was the courier. When he arrived in Parowan, William Dame gave him a note to all bishops on the route telling them to give James Haslam fast horses all the way to Salt Lake. James Haslam arrived in Salt Lake early in the morning of September 10th, Thursday. Now remember, this attack started Monday. Thursday, he met with Brigham Young first thing in the morning, and that's what I really want to read, Brigham Young's response, if I can find it. Maybe I can't find it. There had been some question. In fact, the district attorney in the trial of John D. Lee, the first trial, tried the Mormon Church and Brigham Young. So it's important to what Brigham Young's message was. And this exists, it's extant at the Church History Library. This is the message that got back on September 13th. Haslam met Isaac C. Haight in the chapel 4 years early in the morning while his church was beginning, and gave him the note. This is what it said. In regard to the immigrant train passing through, you are not to meddle with them. The Indians, we expect, will do as they please, but you should try and preserve good feeling with them. There are no other trains going south that I know of In fact, there was one more train coming south, but he said not that I know of. If those who are there will leave, let them go in peace. While we should be on the alert, on hand, and always ready, we should also possess of ourselves in patience, preserving ourselves and property, ever remembering that God rules. Well, when James Haslam gave that note to Isaac C. Haight, he read it, and Haslam said he cried like a baby and said, "Too late, too late." We don't know exactly how many Indians were here. It's estimated that 200 to 300 were here Monday. They were interested in getting guns and beef. They didn't want a long-term battle. They didn't want to lose their lives to get them. So they started deserting, leaving, going home. John D. Lee and John M. Higbee wanted as many Indians as possible. So they undertook on Tuesday night a very foolish night assault, which was beaten off as well as the first assault had been. The Fancher party had dug a trench that was 20 feet or 20 yards long, 4 feet deep and 5 feet wide, and the bank was 2 feet above. They put the women and the children and the wounded in that trench. And during periods when the sniping wasn't taking place, they chained the wagon wheels together, shoveled dirt under the wagon wheels. So they had a pretty good fort. After that night assault, the militia officers held a meeting and they decided they needed help from the militia in Cedar City. They sent John M. Higbee back to Cedar City. On Wednesday night, Isaac C. Haight and John M. Higbee were taken to Parowan by Elias Morris. They awoke Colonel Dame. He woke up the High Council. They had a meeting. They presented the case for sending the militia. The High Council voted no. You can't send them. Isaac C. Haight and John M. Higbee got Colonel Dame alone, away from the High Council. They told him that the majority of the party had already been killed, that they had reason to know that white men were involved. So they left Parowan thinking they had Colonel Dame's approval. Later, Isaac C. Haight and Colonel Dame argued whether they did or not. They got back to Parowan, or to Cedar, very early Thursday morning. Wednesday afternoon, before Higbee and Haight went to Parowan, they had dispatched some of the Nauvoo Legion. This was without authority. They camped at Little Candle Creek. That's where we stopped at the Page Ranch. That night, the party here, desperate, decided to send 2 men back to Cedar to get help. William Aiden, who was 19, he had lived 6 months in Provo. He said, "I know the Latter-day Saints, they'll help us." Well, they got over to Little Candle Creek. William Stewart shot and killed William Aiden. Joel White wounded his companion. John D. Lee said they tracked him back to the camp, but he may also have died. We don't know for sure. Anyway, John M. Higbee's argument was that white men have interceded and the party knows about it. Then early in the morning on Thursday, they rang the town bell and sent out another detachment of the Nauvoo Legion. So by Friday morning, September 7th, 1857, there are 54 men that we know of by the lists we have that were here on the scene. We don't know how many Indians were left. It's been the figures that you can find both in the trial transcripts and other places, 40 to 100 Indians. The plan was that they would try to lure the company away from the camp. They would save the children, the 17 children, 10 girls and 5 boys, who were 6 years of age and younger, 17 kids. The rest would be done away with. They would promise the party that they needed to leave their wagons, their possessions, put themselves under protection of the militia, and go back to Cedar. And then the Sikhs in Cedar would resupply them and protect them on their way. Samuel Bateman went into camp and negotiated for 2 hours. John D. Lee came in, said that they needed to hurry. It was getting late in the day, almost noon. They negotiated another hour and a half. Finally, after 3.5 hours of negotiation, the Fancher Baker party agreed to give up their arms, leave their livestock, their possessions, and put themselves under protection of the militia. Nephi Johnson, the best Indian interpreter, was sent by John M. Higbee and John D. Lee to tell the Indians of the Klan. The Indians were to go about a mile south of here to a pass that was thick with brush, that was narrow. They would swarm out and kill the women and older children. The men of the party would be escorted by militiamen, one by the side of each one. Their assignment was to kill the person at their side. If they objected, they would shoot their gun in the air and somebody else would carry out the execution. So on the afternoon of September 7th, Friday, a wagon was driven into the compound, the circle of wagons. Just 10 girls and 7 boys, 6 years of age or younger, were loaded in the wagon. Samuel McMurdy drove that wagon. It led the procession. Next came John D. Lee. Behind that was a second wagon driven by Samuel Bateman. It had 3 wounded men and a woman attendant, all from the party. Behind that, about 60 yards, came the women and older children walking. And behind that, 50 to 400 yards, and it depends on which account you believe. I'm guessing it was more like 100 yards. But the men came single file, escorted by the militia. John M. Higbee was last in line. He gave the order, halt, do your duty. And when that happened, they began shooting the men. The Indians rushed out, killed the women and older children. Altogether, 118 people from Arkansas lost their lives here at Mountain Meadows. This carry on down here that you're probably going to go to contains 34 bodies. Those were the people that were killed when they were camped and encircled here. In 1859, Brevet Major Jacob Carlson came down with some of the army from Camp Floyd. On Saturday after the massacre, they sent out a burial party and they put the bodies in ravines, in the trenches here, in the rifle pits, covering them over with a light layer of dirt. And many of the bodies had become exposed by the weather and by animals. And so Carlson and his party buried 34 bodies here, and they built that old rock carry-on that used to be there. And his investigation report said the massacre was carried out by the Indians assisted by the Mormons. The militiamen had agreed that they would send John D. Lee to Salt Lake to report to Brigham Young. They would all keep it a secret. It would be portrayed as an Indian massacre. On the 29th of September, John D. Lee arrived in Salt Lake and gave a false report of what had happened here. And Brigham Young did not pursue a vigorous investigation. Neither did the new territorial governor, Alfred Cummings. He said that Buchanan's pardon would apply to all of those that were involved. The first indictments came in 1859 after Carlson returned to Camp Floyd. Judge Cradlebaugh issued an order to arrest John D. Lee, Isaac C. Haight, Philip Clinging Smith, John M. Higbee, and William Stewart. And they went into hiding at this time. They became fugitives for the first time at this time. By 1859, Brigham Young knew enough that he dissolved the Cedar Stake, dissolved the Fort Harmony Ward, and ironically appointed John D. Lee as the presiding elder at Fort Harmony. But all of those that were known to have participated were released from their church callings. The 17 children were taken by Philip Clinging Smith, and they were distributed to local homes. In 1859, the Congress of the United States appropriated money. Jacob Hamlin rounded up the 17 children. James Forney, the Indian agent, escorted them back to Arkansas to family members. There's no truth to the rumor that an 18th child was kept in Cedar and raised there. That has been studied and studied and studied, and it is not true. It's just a rumor. Yes.
But the children were distributed among members, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The children were taken by members, right?
Were the children taken by members until they?
Yes, they were put in the homes of members, local members, until 1859. One of the girls had a wounded leg and a wounded arm. You can imagine what that would be to a 6-year-old girl. A wound in your arm would pretty much mangle your arm. So some of them were casualties themselves, but they were all returned to Arkansas. And 1870, there was a further indictment that was issued by Judge Boardman of 9 men. The same 5 that I listed: John D. Lee, Isaac C. Haight, William Dame, Philip Clinging Smith, Samuel Bateman, William Stewart, Joel White, and Ernest Graves. I think those were the 9. And the United States Marshal let it be known that the most wanted was John D. Lee. In 1870, a church court was held for Isaac C. Haight and John D. Lee. They were both excommunicated. They were told they could never return to the church in this life. In 1872, Isaac C. Haight requested a rehearing. It was held, and he was reinstated. John D. Lee requested a rehearing. At first it was granted, then it was rescinded. And John D. Lee was not approved to be rebaptized and have his temple blessings restored till April of 1961. In March of 1961, a grandson, Merritt Norton, was baptized for John D. Lee. He was confirmed for John D. Lee. And Ezra Taft Benson officiated at the endowment ceremony and at the sealing for John D. Lee. John D. Lee was arrested in November of 1874. He was living at Lee's Ferry, Lonely Dell. He came to Panguitch to visit one of his wives. And he was arrested there, taken to Beaver. There were 2 trials. The first trial started July 23rd, 1875. It went till August 5th of 1875. The 12 men on the jury, 3 were non-members, 1 a former member, 8 members. The marshal, or the district attorney, Carey, tried the Mormon Church and John D. Lee, and because of that, it was a hung jury. The 3 non-members voted guilty. The former member voted innocent. The 8 LDS members of the jury voted innocent. So a second jury, or second trial, was held, and by then Summers had become the district attorney. He let it be known that he was trying John D. Lee alone, that if people who had documents or information would come in and testify, he would quash the indictments against the other 8. Well, people that had been in hiding and refused to testify came in and their tongues were loosed.